Welcome to Tech Conversations with Grace Chng, a podcast by News on Tech. And we discuss with tech experts the technologies that have the potential to impact and advance societies, communities, and nations. So in this podcast today, we have Ben Tan, who is a senior executive partner with Gartner. You've been in the tech industry for 30 years? And I've known you for that long. So you have worked in global and regional tech companies. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I have a passion for tech and a passion for business side of tech as well. So when these two come together, it's like I've not worked for the last 30 years.
So it's like playtime.
Yeah, it's enjoyable, but also I think part of me is helping people to become more productive with the technology, that they use.
Yeah.
In whatever case they may be at,
But we also live in turbulent times.
Yes, we do.
Right? Especially with the announcement of U.S. tariffs. So just a quick background. On April 2nd, the U.S. government announced reciprocal tariffs on all countries, right, not subject to other sanctions. So there's a baseline of 10% tariff on all goods, but then this differs. This can go up with some countries or smaller with other countries, right?
Yeah.
But they are causing major disruptions for the global economy. So from the tech perspective, much has been said, right? It has. So you have done, you have observed quite a bit about businesses generally. So what is the impact of tariffs on the tech IT industry?
So we have to take a look at scenarios. And when we look at long-term scenarios, there are going to be worst-case scenarios and probable case scenarios and best-case scenarios. So we run all three scenarios. And the one that probably you want to spend time on is the worst-case scenario because you'll have the deepest and longest impact.
Right.
What we call that is the long and deep, okay, the impact, versus the short and shallow. You'll be back to whereabouts you were growing at in a few years' time, whereas the long and deep may take you more than 5 years to recover where you were at, right? So you get that scenario. So when you look at that perspective, you try to understand, how is it impacting my organization, right? That's the first question you kind of ask, right? And when organizations look at that impact, they realize that, I'm very dependent on American technology. Unfortunately, or positively, either way you look at it, they have developed the most amount of technology, and therefore a lot of organizations tend to be dependent on that technology. Now, if the tariffs were to go up significantly from China to the U.S., their cost to serve would be significantly impacted. How much does that translate to each country may vary, okay, depend on the scenarios of what products you use and how you use it. Yeah.
But how does that reshape the trade flows?
Yeah, so, trade is like water. You'll find the path of least resistance, right? And eventually, once we know the final tariffs, right, I believe the trade will figure out the path of lowest tariffs and therefore the lowest cost to serve. In some scenarios, there may be big investments, which Donald Trump is betting on, that will move manufacturing back to the U.S. But in some scenarios, it may be still cheaper with the tariffs to manufacture abroad. So there is a multi-scenario that might pan out.
So will there be a situation, or there is already a situation, where companies are moving their manufacturing out of China? For example, Apple has moved some of its production to India as well as to Vietnam. And you see other companies doing the same.
Yes, I think they are, quite a few. But because China has built that manufacturing hub over 20 years.
So the ecosystem is there.
Yes, correct. Not just the key manufacturers, but the supply chain, the raw materials. They have made it extremely efficient and extremely productive. So to move it out, it has to have a significant benefit before someone would move it out, right? So I think it would take time still.
So for the impact on user organizations, what is it that they have to be looking out for during these turbulent times?
So this time is they have to figure out if they can source locally. That might be a better scenario because then you will not be affected by tariffs either way. In some scenarios, you have no choice but to buy from overseas provider. The option there is to try and reduce as much as you can when you purchase from overseas. And therefore, the third scenario is trying to be more fluid, more flexible with your contracts, to give you the agility to make changes when tariff change,
Right, but apart from that, that means long-term planning has to change, right? Because companies plan 2 years out, 5 years out for infrastructural development, for example. So all of this have to change. It's kind of fluid. How do you predict even?
I think you need to diversify. That is a long-term strategy no matter what happens, right? And that diversification helps you buffer impacts more. But diversification costs you money. So that gives you a higher cost to serve, but it gives you agility also. So there's a benefit to that. So you need to craft your strategy that gives you lower risks, more agility, and therefore we think that's the best way moving forward.
Will companies have to compromise on the kind of or the level of technology and quality of goods that they source if they diversify their supply chain?
So there's always a strategic approach to making decisions, and the strategic approach has to compromise on a trifecta perspective. Firstly, on the job you need to get done. If the supply is only coming from 2 locations, it's only coming from these 2 locations, right? Then the second part is measuring the cost and the cost to serve. And the third part is the risk and the risk assessment. So when you do a trifecta decision making, you tend to be a little bit more balanced and a little bit more strategic rather than tactical. Right? So that's the best approach to do it with.
What do you think is the likely outcome from these turbulent times?
We feel that the probable case would be a positive scenario. Maybe it's a little bit more optimistic, or you could say cautiously optimistic, but it's optimistic for one reason. Because if U.S. were to maintain the tariffs, it would impact them the most compared to other countries. So they can't sustain it for long, and they can't do it for every market, right? So we know that probably they're just trying to negotiate for the best terms they can get, and they might land a probable case scenario where it's a better off scenario for America in the short term as well as the long term. That means they will have tariffs because they want to move factories back to the U.S., manufacturing back to the U.S. And if they don't have huge tariffs, then their cost to serve won't be too high. Okay? So if they are left with high tariffs, the cost to serve for American companies will be too high. They will have to move out of America.
And that means American companies not competitive anymore.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah. So, and this is going to be long term, right? It doesn't matter which administration is in office.
That's a hard question to answer, to be honest, because each administration has a political agenda that might be different. If it stays with Donald, Mr. Trump, President Trump, for the next 3.5 years, I think his path won't change. I think it's pretty consistent already. But if J.D. Vance will be the potential candidate in line after Donald, and if he does win, I think it will extend another 4 years of similar strategies, policies. But if they lose that election, then the opposition may take a different path. It's hard to predict.
Okay. But the trade flows would have changed and
Yeah.
better.
So for now, when we see the trade flows, China has reduced dependency on the U.S. significantly over the last 4 years or so, right? because they started giving China some tariffs when Donald was in the first year of his term. And then when Biden came in, he continued with it. And then now Donald is escalating to a higher level. So China realized that they shouldn't be over-dependent on the U.S., and they have reduced the amount of exports they rely on the U.S., and as such, I think China will get affected much less than U.S. would,
So for the consumer, if I keep buying my phones and laptops that are American brand, will I have to pay more?
Potentially, if the tariffs are high. I think no matter what, even if the tariffs were reasonable or low, there will be transfer of cost, I feel, right? Okay. But that's yet to be seen. If the tariffs are high, for sure the transfer cost will be significantly higher, unless they move a significant amount of their operations out of the U.S. to reduce their cost to serve, right? If not, the U.S. will be very high cost to serve because of imposing the tariffs or bringing goods and services in. Yeah.
Right. So thank you very much, Ben, for your insights on American tariffs on the rest of the world. Thank you to our listeners for listening to us. Please go to Spotify and Apple Podcasts to listen to us.